Okay.
So welcome to the Global Chamber Global Happy Hour. Tonight we have, or today, this morning, wherever you are, we have Carrie Ann Appleton calling in from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And she's going to talk with us about her life and experience. So Carrie Ann.
Thank you, Todd. Just for technicalities, if you want to learn how to say Rio de Janeiro in Portuguese, it's Rio de Janeiro.
Rio
The
de
R's
Janeiro.
in Portuguese are pronounced like an H.
Oh, okay.
Rio
I
de
learned
Janeiro.
something. That's good.
This is why
Yeah.
they don't say rock and roll. They say hawk and they say holy, because they never end on a consonant either. They always end on the vowel. So it's hawk and
Oh,
holy
wow.
instead of rock and roll. It's quite funny.
Rock in the hole.
Anyways, yeah. My name is Carrie and I see Omar has joined us. He's a contact of mine. So Omar has joined us from the UK, which is pretty
Nice.
late for him. So I'm sure that's why
Yeah.
he has his camera off. But my name is Carrie Ann. As I said, I'm originally technically I was born in Massachusetts, but I lived there for only 2 months. And then my family moved to a small town in New Hampshire. It's a town of 3,000. I grew up in a ski town. And then in 2000, I moved to Colorado after traveling around the world with an international organization called Up With People. Some of you might be familiar with it. I think, Todd, just because you're in Colorado, you might have heard of Up With People. And then in 2015, I moved to Brazil, to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and I'm still here at the moment. I tried to come back recently to the United States because I was ready to actually have a winter. I'll be honest. I know some people are like, what? Why would you want to have a winter? You live in paradise. But because I grew up as a competitive skier, I really miss the winter and winter sports. And unfortunately, I'm not able to come back yet because I have a black Labrador and their airlines are not taking large dogs into the US at the moment due to rabies. The airlines are not taking dogs in because they cut back on staff due to COVID and the pandemic, and they haven't rehired those staff yet. So I'm still in kind of standby here in Brazil. But my adventures have taken me to many places, and I've worked for many different international organizations. Prior to the career that I have now, which I'll get into in a minute, I worked primarily I had a 15-year career in nonprofits. Like I worked actually, not only did I travel with Up With People, but I worked for them for several years. That's how I know Chelsea Panchot, who introduced me to this global chamber. And I also worked for an organization. Well, actually, going back one more, after Up With People, I worked for an organization called Mending Faces, where we sent a medical team to the Philippines to provide free surgeries for kids born with cleft lip and cleft palate. So I got to go to the Philippines several times, bringing the medical team there. And then I got to work for an organization called US Brazil Connect, hence why I came to Brazil. I actually, when I first started working with them, I was just a contractor. I came down for 1 month to oversee all their logistics and operations of the best way I could describe it is an English immersion camp for Brazilian high school students. It's pretty fascinating because the industry here, Brazilian industry, wants to have a workforce with knowledge in English because they want to have a more global-minded workforce. So this organization was formed called US Brazil Connect in partnership with the Confederation of Industry here in Brazil to provide these like English immersion camps, 1 month fun activities to get these high school students engaged in English with Americans. And most of the Americans that we brought to Brazil were community college students, because community college students make up less than 2% of all students that travel abroad. And so giving them an opportunity to come and have a global experience, which is a beautiful thing because it opens their mind and opportunities, because otherwise most of them wouldn't leave the United States. Actually, it was really surprising that a lot of them had never even left their own state. You know, for someone who started traveling when I was 17, I was a foreign exchange student to Australia. It was surprising to meet other people that had not left their own state. So it was a great opportunity to help these students go there. So anyways, I started a contractor with them. They grew very quickly. They started with one site in Salvador Bahia of Brazil. Next year they did 9 sites. That's when I came on board. And then they grew to 32 sites across Brazil. So I came on board full time as their director of global partnership, helping them both expand across Brazil, like how do we operationally work very quickly and keep the quality of the program, and also working with all of our partners across Brazil, our partners on the Brazilian side. And this is why, Todd, I also started to learn Portuguese, because I was responsible for reviewing all of our contracts with them. So you can imagine, majority of them were in Portuguese. Some of the sites were kind to translate it. So I had to start to learn Portuguese very quickly to read all these contracts. And then I really wanted to live here. I actually never wanted to come to Brazil. It was never on my bucket list of countries to go to. I have no idea why. It just never called me. But when I got this opportunity to come down to Brazil, it was originally only for one time, for 1 month. I came down here and was just blown away by the culture, just how warm, and not just like temperature warm, but just how warm and embracing the culture is here. This is the first kind of Latin American country I'd been to outside of Costa Rica. And to experience being here and just being embraced. So for example, we go to the school and every single day when the students come in, they want to greet you by hugging you and kissing you and both cheeks. You know, it's something so foreign to me and also so amazing just to have that physical touch and just feel acknowledged, right? So it really started to open something up within me, like, I'm really curious about this culture and I want to learn more about it. So that year, that was 2013, I got an opportunity to come back down to Brazil, but this time I went to the north part of Brazil to a state called Amapá, and I went to the capital called Macapá, which is right on the equator. So you can imagine how hot it was. And it's Amapá is where the Amazon River meets the Atlantic Ocean. So it's like way up there. And while I was there, I thought that was my last trip to Brazil. I had said, okay, after that trip, I'm going to go to Rio because I want to see Rio. I feel like I've gone to Brazil and I haven't seen Rio. I should at least see Rio. It's like going to the United States and not seeing New York City or Washington, D.C., like one of the bigger cities. So I went to Rio, and within 45 minutes of being here, I was like in love with this place. And what was interesting is a friend of mine was on my team because I hired him to be on my team to Macapá. I looked at him and I said, Chris, I have to live here. And he's like, I'm sorry, what did you say? I said, Chris, I have to live here. And he's like, okay, we haven't been here that long, but from what I can tell, this place is chaos. And you are the most organized, structured person I know. I can't imagine you living here. I said, I don't know what it is, but I have to live here. So fast forward now to 2021, and I have been here for 6 years. And it's actually been really amazing because even though I'm a very still structured and organized person, I needed to be in a little bit of chaos to kind of find myself. And in this process, I really have done that because I shifted my career totally from being and working in nonprofits, specifically in organizational management and fundraising, to now being an empowerment practitioner, where I support people with really connecting more deeply with themselves and looking at what basically in their subconscious mind is holding them back from creating the life they truly want. So looking at their limiting beliefs and helping them to reprogram the mind and the body. But I didn't just jump into this like 5 years ago. I have actually been doing a lot of this work for a long time. So when I worked up with people, actually, it was one day I just had a panic attack out of the blue. I don't know where it came from, why it happened, but it scared me a lot to go, I don't know what's happening to me. So I started to get into meditation back then and started studying the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton to kind of understand and help myself really learn to regulate myself. And that took me down a rabbit hole studying more into neuroscience, psychology, yoga, meditation, and Reiki. and putting it to practice in my own life. And then when I worked for US Brazil Connect, we implemented the conscious leadership model within the organization. If you haven't heard of the conscious leadership group, I highly recommend. And they have an excellent book called The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And I love that work so much that I became the facilitator for the organization of that work. And so I was getting to use things I had been using in my personal life, adding it to my professional life, and really creating this massive impact across all the teams that we had in Brazil by using these tools. And so in my little self-discovery journey here in Brazil, I realized that I really wanted to be working more in that area than what I was working in. I felt like there was an expiration date to my time with working with nonprofits and moving more into that kind of personal development world. And so that's kind of where I am today. And one of the things I really wanted to share with you guys was about the topic that I chose, was the power of ease in the workspace. And it doesn't have to just be in the workspace, by the way. It can be in any space in your life, actually. Everything I'm going to share with you, you can use, and in your personal life, in your relationships, in your professional life, etc. So I actually put together a little bit of a presentation, but before we start with the presentation, I want to give you a tool right off the bat to help you just to come into more ease. Are you guys game to play with me? I know some people are multitasking, but if you have a moment to pause for a couple of minutes and do this with me, I highly recommend it. So are you guys game? Okay. So this is called the 4-7-8 breathing technique. So what you're going to do is you're going to inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7 counts, and exhale for 8 counts. And we're going to do that 3 times. I'm just going to do it pretty simple. Omar says I'm game. Awesome, Omar, you're always game. So I'll guide you through it. You can keep your eyes open if you want. You can close them. When you close your eyes, you connect more into your body. There's not a right or wrong way to do this. Just follow my lead and do the best that you can. So exhale all the air out. And inhale in for 4 counts. Hold for 7 counts. And exhale for 8. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 7 counts. And exhale for 8. Inhale for 4 counts. Hold for 7 counts. And exhale for 8. Just kind of go back to your regular breathing and notice how you feel. Notice if you feel any different. And it's okay if you don't. This is a practice, so this might not be something that you regularly do, and your body might not be used to it. The beautiful thing about this practice, and the reason why there's a longer exhale, is because when we have a longer exhale, we actually are starting to push our body back into a parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest and digest state. So even if you don't remember the 4-7-8, if you just remember, when I need to take a pause and become present, can I just have a longer exhale? And just keep exhaling out, having a longer exhale until you can start to feel your heart slowing down and the pace of your breathing slowing down. And what happens is actually you move out of your limbic brain into that fight or flight and back into your more prefrontal cortex, which is the more conscious brain. So I want to talk a little bit. Okay, I can share my slides. Cool. Thank you, Todd, or whoever set that up for me to share. So, here it is. So 4-7-8, just a reminder. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7 counts, exhale for 8 counts, and repeat. And usually I do it 3 to 5 times just to help me get into a more rested state. The more that you do this and practice, the more easier you're going to be able to just come back into that parasympathetic. If you struggle to come back into your parasympathetic, it doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. It just means your body is trained to be more in fight or flight, right? Most of us live in this kind of fight or flight constant. The minute we wake up, we check our phone. We get that dopamine hit just by checking our phone. We start to turn ourselves on. So it's learning to like, can I not go right into that fight or flight state of being, into that sympathetic nervous system? And can I instead come into a more rest and digest state? And it doesn't mean you have to be this way all the time, by the way, of course not, because we need to be in that kind of go, go, go kind of state. And we need to come down into our parasympathetic nervous system. So I thought about like having all this research, and I thought, okay, I think most people know that mindfulness and being present and being in ease is good for us. But I just wanted to pull this one quote from Harvard Business Review. Mindfulness should no longer be considered just a nice to have for executives. It's a must have, a way to keep our brains healthy, to support self-regulation. I want to focus on that because we're going to talk about that, to support self-regulation and effective decision-making capabilities. I know as I started to go down this rabbit hole, that I didn't even realize that just by coming back into parasympathetic nervous system, into a self-regulated state, that I would be more effective in decision-making capabilities. And of course, the last piece is to protect yourself from toxic stress. So that stress that does not help our immune system, does not help our relationships, does not help our communication. The key thing here is they often use the word mindfulness. And so many people think it's just about their thoughts. I have to control my thoughts. And instead, what they miss out on is that it's not just the mind, it's also the body. So how our body reacts. So even in that simple breathing, where you have a longer exhale coming into the parasympathetic nervous system, you start to notice your heartbeat starts to slow down. It's not as fast, right? You can feel more expansion into your lungs, etc. You're starting to come back down. So it's not just about mindfulness, it's about mind and body fullness, is what I'm going to say. And this is what I call ease. Kind of what is ease? Ease is just being in this more peaceful state. That doesn't mean that we don't have emotions and we don't feel things in that state of ease, but in our state of ease, we're more conscious. When we're in a more triggered state, it's harder to be conscious. And I'm going to explain why in a minute, especially when we get into the brain. But this is what I call more like ease. And before we really jump into like, how this is chemically happens in our brain and like how to get into ease, I just kind of want to first talk about the benefits of ease. And some of these things I'm sure most of you know, and maybe you don't. Maybe I'm making an assumption here. Well, the benefits of ease and really mind and body fullness is to stop acting from our emotional brain. Like we don't even realize that we're reacting instead of responding to stuff. And oftentimes, we really want to respond versus react. When we're in a state of ease, we return to that rest and digest state. And that doesn't just mean our body's resting, as in sleeping and digesting food. That also means we're digesting information. So one of the reasons why I started with a breathing exercise towards the beginning is to help you come into a state where you might be able to digest this information better for yourself, because you're in a more relaxed state. On the physical side, of course, your body feels more restful. You're in a digestive state. Your blood is now geared toward and focused towards the internal organs, versus when you're in fight or flight or that sympathetic nervous system, you have more blood and oxygen running to the limbs to do something, to fight, flight, freeze, go, whatever you need to do. So when you come back down, you're actually helping your body stay more healthy because it has more oxygen, more blood going to your internal organs, to your immune system. you actually find clarity. Or I'm not gonna give away why yet until we talk about the brain, but you actually start to find more clarity. You make more conscious decisions. And it's easier to make decisions, actually. You improve your relationships because, again, it's easier to make those decisions. You're responding versus reacting. You're going to have better relationships. And that also increases trust with yourself and with others, because you're coming more from your conscious self versus your unconscious self. It creates a sense of safety within yourself when you come at it, things in life with more ease. You reduce stress and anxiety. It increases your creativity because it expands your mind more, enhances focus, and improves your communication. So these are all kind of, and there's much more, there's more benefits of ease, but these are kind of the main ones that I love to focus on. So we're going to get a little bit geeky here and talk about the brain, because I think it's so imperative to kind of understand how this works. So when we're in a fight or flight, in that sympathetic, we're more fired up in our limbic system, where you can see the emotional brain. And there's a little part of our limbic system called the amygdala. So when we're in extreme emotion, when we've been triggered, so we're feeling anger, we're feeling sadness, rage, fear, we're often at times what's happening is we're in our amygdala, which is the limbic part of the brain, which is the emotional. And oftentimes we're going to react from that place. And we're often going to react based on how we dealt with those emotions in mostly in our childhood, unless we've done the work to reprogram our mind and body. And so we're not reacting from our prefrontal cortex, which is basically the learning. As you can see in the prefrontal is the front part, it's like your forehead. And so what we want to do is recognize, oh my goodness, I'm in my limbic system. I'm in my emotional brain, or most of us in our amygdala, when I'm in that fight or flight and having it being triggered. And I want to come back into that prefrontal cortex, because when I'm in my prefrontal cortex, in my conscious mind, I'm more open, I'm more expansive. I can see more opportunities. I can find the clarity. So this is why we find clarity when we come back down into our parasympathetic nervous system, come back into that rest and digest state. We're going to actually find more clarity. We're going to be more open, more expansive, and we have more ease. We feel more ease. And so I just kind of wanted to give you a basic understanding. Again, some of you might know what already about this parts of the brain. And for some of you, this might be new information. I know for me, I love to get this kind of nitty gritty detail to kind of understand what's actually happening in my mind and why is this important. So when our limbic system is fired, it's harder for us to pull stuff from our more conscious mind. But there is a way to calm ourselves down. So when we're in a sympathetic versus a parasympathetic, I love these images because you can see the sympathetic, and again, it's a little dramatized. But sometimes when you're in your sympathetic, you feel like this woman in her sympathetic, where you just feel, oh my God, things are falling apart. I can't handle life anymore, etc. And again, this is on the extreme side, but you might start noticing as you start to become more aware of yourself that, oh, I'm kind of feeling my heart racing in this moment. And it's because it's become so normalized, especially in our society. Most of us live in our sympathetic nervous system in that kind of fight or flight state, and it's become so normal. I'll give you an example. A couple of months ago, my dad called me with some health issues, and he's like, I can't see the doctor for 3 weeks, and I'm just curious if you have some tips and tools of what I can do about this situation. He wasn't having any, I'm going to get a little bit TMI, and I know he's fine with it, but he wasn't having any bowel movements. And I said, okay, Dad, let me just ask you, do you have any stress going on at work or in your life? And he said, no, everything's normal. I go, well, what's normal to you, Dad? He goes, well, we're doing renovations at the hotel, blah, blah, blah. I go, that kind of sounds stressful. And it's like, no, yeah, but it's normal. And that's the thing, we've normalized stress. And I gave him some breathing exercises, and also we looked at his diet, because he was definitely eating foods that were binding him up. And within 2 days, he was clearing him out, which is great. Actually, I gave him the 4-7-8 breathing exercise to do 3 times a day just to help him come down and give his body a chance to digest the food and not just like hold on to it while he gets, and is busy throughout his day and stays focused on things at the hotel. So the thing about it is we've normalized staying in our sympathetic nervous system. Now, again, it doesn't mean you have to be in your parasympathetic half the time and you're sympathetic. You just have to, one, be conscious of where you're at, which one you're in, and how it's serving you. And also do your best to, can I have moments where I come into my parasympathetic, especially when it's really important to me? Like I have to make a big decision right now, or something's going on in my life that requires my focus and attention, or I want to do this creative project and I'm struggling, and I've got, writer's block or creativity block. How can I come back into my parasympathetic? This is why it's so, important. If you look at these two images, think about which one would you rather respond from? Which one just feels more at ease? So in order to get there, we first need to emotionally regulate. We need to emotionally regulate. Now, this might be new for some of you, and this might be familiar for some of you. But I think it's important to share because I know for me, I had no idea what this was until I started doing this work and really understanding myself. And really, this is self-regulate. You want to self-regulate your body. So this is a term used to come down from the emotion, whatever the emotion is, that fight or flight, or if you're feeling sad, angry, or fear. And I just want to say that when you look at like anger, it could be frustrated, it could be upset, it could be mad. These are all derivatives of anger. And fear could be nervous, could be, I'm worried about a deadline, I'm worried about getting that thing back to that client, I'm worried about my flight. Those are derivatives of fear. So you're physically feeling it in your body. So I want you to just take a moment and think about a situation where you have recently felt worried about something. Like maybe it was a deadline, maybe it was a flight, maybe it was trying to get to the office and there's rush hour. I'm not sure in each country if people are still in lockdown or not, but just think about something where you have felt like worried or even nervous. Maybe you had to give a presentation to a group like I am tonight. And just kind of notice as you think about that last time that you felt that kind of worry or nervousness. Notice how you feel in your body. And do you feel any difference in your body? Those kind of physiological sensations. And I can't see you guys, so I'm going to just assume that you're feeling something. Hopefully you're feeling something. And then just take a minute and breathe into it. And especially as you have a longer exhale, how those sensations just start to dissipate. This is how we can start to just emotionally regulate and then help ourselves come out of our limbic mind and back into our prefrontal cortex. So one of the reasons why so many of us struggle to emotionally regulate or self-regulate is because during the first few years of life is when we were supposed to learn how to do that. We were dependent on others to help us regulate. And the majority of us, I would assume, didn't have parents that knew that or knew how to do that, because I know, at least for me, I had two working parents. So they weren't there all the time to help me as a baby regulate. So many of us don't know how to regulate because of that. And then we don't understand our emotions because later on in life, we were ridiculed or punished for showing our emotions, like anger or fear or even sadness. And depending on our gender, it's even gender specific. And so most of us don't even understand how to self-regulate or emotionally regulate. And this is why we tend to react instead of respond. And so now you have this opportunity to go, I can learn this skill. It's easy to learn, and it will actually help my life. It will actually help my relationships. It will actually help me be a better decision maker and more creative and bring more ease to my life. One thing I just want to share is self-regulation is not using these outside influences. These are just some of them. Oftentimes, because we never learned how to self-regulate, we often go to things that other people did. So, for example, when I was needing to deal with my emotions on an unconscious level, I would go to food. Why? Because that's what my mother did. So that's how I saw her regulate her emotions. And again, this was all unconscious. And I did the same thing. The other thing my mom does is she goes to social media. Well, she didn't when I was a child because social media didn't exist. But I noticed I had similar tendencies as her. Just pick up the phone, go on social media, and just come back down. The other thing that I picked up, and this one for sure I picked up from my mom. My parents got divorced when I was 2, so I was very influenced by my mom since I live with her. But my mom, when she has a big emotion, all of a sudden she goes and finds something to do. So that busyness, that busyness. So this is not necessarily self-regulation. This is not, I'm not going to say these things are bad because they are supporting you to come back down. But if you want to become more conscious, and have healthier ways to be in the world, just kind of notice that these things might be hindering you from having that, having those healthier ways. And again, I'm not going to say they're bad. I know some people might say some of these things are negative. They might have negative effects on you, but realize they were serving a purpose to help you get here today. So self-regulation is not that. So as I talked about, when you come down and start to emotionally regulate and really come into a state of ease, you're going to start responding to life rather than reacting to life. And that's because when you're in a regulated state, your conscious mind is open and ready. You can see more opportunities and you're going to respond versus react. And reacting is usually going to come from old familiar patterns or behaviors that are oftentimes unconscious until we put our awareness on it, that we actually react in that way, or we do that thing that we didn't even realize we did because it's coming from an unconscious part of ourselves, and often when we're dysregulated. So I love this image of my ears, steam coming out of my ears. Do I want to respond from that? It's like drinking a bottle of soda after you've been shaking it up. It's like terrible. Maybe you think it's funny because it's like squirting in your face as you're trying to drink it and it's going up your nose. But I'm going to make an assumption here, and I own that it's an assumption that most people would rather wait until the fuzz goes down, the bubbles go down to drink the soda. So that's where it's like thinking about, I want to respond from a regulated state rather than react in a dysregulated state. So I have a practice for you guys. It's really simple. There's just 2 things that get you started. One is schedule moments to tune inward. So this is something that I do on a regular basis. And how I do it is anytime I go to the bathroom, because I know there's going to be moments during the day I have to go to the bathroom, that I pause after I've gone to the bathroom, whether I'm sitting still in the toilet or if I'm washing my hands. I just pause and I check in with myself. And I go, where do I feel lightness in my body? Where do I feel tension in my body? What am I feeling right now? What are the sensations? What's my breathing pattern? What's my heart rate? And I'm just practicing connecting with myself. And just being the observer of myself and not the judge, and giving myself that break. And then the second thing that I love doing that I want to just suggest is practice self-regulation throughout the day. So notice when you are feeling triggered or kind of a big emotion, and do a breathing technique like the 4-7-8, or just, a longer exhale. Bring yourself back into a regulated state. Just bring yourself back. And at first it might take a while because the mind is going to want to keep playing the story. You're like, oh my God, that person did that thing and that pissed me off and blah, blah, blah. And you're just firing the amygdala, which is just activating your whole nervous system. And so if you can just come back to the body, maybe just check in, how did my lungs feel as I breathe in and as I breathe out? Can I count to 6 or 8 to exhale, and just coming back down into that regulated state. just practicing these two things alone will start to support you with reprogramming your nervous system, which will bring you more ease into your life. So which will bring more ease into your life. I know this is really quick, so the presentation, but if you're interested in learning more about me, my website is super simple and want to know more about my work, this is where you can reach me at. And now I want to open it up to Q&A. Any questions, answers? Because we only have 10 minutes left. Was that helpful? It was so quick. I felt like I was like.
Thanks, Carrie Ann. That was great. I can relate to that. I've been practicing mindfulness for years myself. So I understand the value of it and I understand the importance of it. So not knowing exactly what you were going to be talking about today, this was a pleasant surprise. So thank you. Yeah.
Is there any questions you have, Todd? Or is there a practice you use for mindfulness?
I practice, I got it through Buddhism in Taiwan. I have a Buddhist monk who's basically my master. So I learned everything through Chinese and it all came to me through Chinese, but I practice Anapanasati, which basically is just awareness of the breath, awareness of the thoughts and then the sensations. So yeah, I'm actually just finishing a book. So it's a very interesting experience and I support that wholeheartedly.
Nice. Are you finishing writing a book or reading a book?
I'm finishing writing a book. It's just a basic,
Beautiful.
it's very small. But it's my first one, so it's a big book. But it's about mindfulness and the I Ching, the yin yang. And so I've combined sort of the concepts of mindfulness into doing a lot of study with the I Ching, the Book of Changes, and coming out with a lot of those concepts of the balancing between two aspects of one thing. So that would be like a day, it has night and it has day, or the concept of good and bad, or being truly the same concept, just a different expression of the same thing, because the two can't live or exist separately. So there's so many aspects of life that goes back to that aspect of just like what you were talking about, is finding that first it's an awareness and then it's being able to have that ability to balance it. So from a yin yang perspective, it's that heat is yang, and so when we're agitated, then that's excess heat. So we would need to insert the yin energy, which is a cooler energy, a more relaxed energy. So being able to do that, and it also just brings around more that awareness of how things really are so closely connected, that anger and happiness are just just like part of each other in their own sense. I was listening to a Chinese man talking about the I Ching the other day, the Book of Changes, and he was talking about right and wrong, or correct and wrong, and he was saying that even in anything that's done correctly or anything that is correct, there are aspects of incorrect in it, and anything that is incorrect, there are always aspects of correct in it. So nothing is pure. There's always that aspect that one thing lives within the other, and in our culture we see good and bad as being so distinctly different, and when we can recognize that in fact there are aspects of the other in each of them, it really brings a different realization, I think, to a lot of things.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I'm a believer of there's not a right or wrong. It both exist simultaneously. It's not a good or bad.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and everything is a part of the whole.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Right and wrong are two expressions of one thing, and that's a hard concept to
Yeah.
grasp when we aren't raised to have that concept. But the more I think of it, and after being so influenced by the Chinese culture and mindset and language, it does make sense. And seeing it in reality, it's just the idea that death and life, they're inseparable. They're two expressions of one thing. And we see it right now in the changing of the seasons. We see that cycle every year. We see those cycles happening. So it's not something that is strange to us. It's just that we've never been taught to perceive life the way we see it, and in a cyclic basis in our everyday lives.
Yep. I look at emotions that way too. So I don't look at emotions as negative or positive. Emotions are actually beautiful expressions of being human. When I look at emotions now as a sensation. So even if I'm angry, I'm like, oh, I feel this like heat, as you talk about, in my body. And for me, I'll feel like a tightness in my jaw, tightness in my upper back, usually in shoulders. And I'm like,
It should be
ooh,
a yang energy.
yeah, and it'll be really interesting because I'll be like, oh, I'm having an experience here and it's not bad. Now, when I start projecting it and start yelling at somebody, then that might not be the best situation. Or if I hold it in, right?
Right, yeah, or even hold your breath because of that. Yeah, I in a lot of situations, we tend to want to label things, and that's something that I learned early on to stop doing. So stop labeling, oh, I like this, oh, I don't like that, or oh, this is good, or oh, that's bad, because that's only reinforcing our sort of biased perspectives and viewpoints.
And it's not easy to switch out of it. Like you unconsciously say good or bad or right or wrong, or I like or don't like. Yeah, totally. Yeah, for sure.
So Lothar, do you have anything to add or any questions?
Well, what I always learned is you do the count of five. I've read that and heard that from several places. So this is a new aspect with the count of 8 to expire. So I'll try that. I've been doing this for a long time. I've had blood pressure issues. And it does calm you down, but I'll be trying this 4, 7, 8 to see what that does to my blood pressure.
Yeah.
Great. Well, just remember to relax your body to notice if there's any tension or any, like a lot of times we walk around with our shoulders up and we don't realize it because, like Carrie Ann was saying, we think it's normal after we've done it for so long.
Yeah. It's interesting because I live such a different life now. I was definitely a person that worked 60 to 80 hours a week. And moved here and said, I moved there, I'm only going to work 25. And at first I didn't know what to do with myself with the extra time. I was so bored out of my mind. But now I think about my life and like I don't set an alarm clock anymore. And it's interesting, like this morning I woke up at 6:30. Like the last couple of weeks I've been waking up at like 5:10 because that's what time the sun gets up. My body just wakes up. I'm like, okay, time to get up. And I have a couple hours in the morning to myself before I really start my day, which is so nice. And you just start tuning in and recognizing stuff that you're like, is that normal? Let me start getting curious about that. Where did I learn this? Where did this come from? Wait a minute, that might not be what I choose for myself anymore. It's a beautiful like journey of self-discovery. And this is the thing about it, starts with awareness. And that's why those 2 simple practices of just taking a moment and like, can I go inward for 3 minutes? Can I take a moment like and just breathe and have a longer exhale and see what happens in my body? So with your blood pressure, I'd be curious to see what happens. Because we have, by pure thought alone, we can create a reaction in our body. So we're pretty powerful. And I don't think we give ourselves that much credit for it. Omar, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry, I'm not going to put my camera on because I'm laid up in bed and the only light I've got is actually coming from my phone, and that's about it. So it's nearly 1 o'clock in the morning here. so yeah, but I always loved it joining in these sort of conversations because they're just really it's just really inspiring, and Carrie Ann knows me really well, actually. I wish it was more well, but I'm too far away because I'm in the UK. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is I really enjoyed the conversation and I really enjoyed the way you shared what you shared, actually, Todd. One of the things that reminds me of what you were talking about right and wrong as well, I know you touched on that as well, Carrie Ann, is Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, where he talks about perception, and conditioning. And again, being brought up for me in a critical household where, I was kind of conditioned to behave a certain way as a result of my primary caregiver, of the experience I had at the hands of my primary caregivers, conditioned me to kind of want to seek more pleasure in negatives, or kind of picking up negatives in people and exploiting that to try and make myself feel more worthy. And it wasn't until, a couple of years ago, probably last 18 months even, that I realized, oh, this isn't right. It sent me on a path leading up to that, down to a level of self-sabotaging, and quite severely in some cases. But then even recognizing and building this level of awareness was also scary as well, because it was like, this isn't normal. And what I learned, and I'm still learning, is that there is actually so much to unlearn, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then when you go through that journey of unlearning, it's like, wow, it's quite invigorating. Initially, it is really scary, but then you start to kind of go from a place, as Catherine Carey and you touched about as well, about becoming more curious and looking at it from a viewpoint of, right, okay, yeah, I can actually shift my perception and shift my the way I kind of behave or respond to certain situations, rather than from being in a place of fear, but more so being in a place of, consciousness for a start, and then also kind of developing a level of gratitude and empathy, not just for self, but then for others around you. So, but it's very much a journey that I've been on, and I think I just wish that there's more people out there that would actually, take note of this, because as you become more aware, for me personally, you kind of see around you how many people aren't actually aware, if that makes sense, and you can pick it up so easily. And sometimes you just want to kind of try to kind of, point things out, but you don't. You know that they're just going to be either triggered by it, it's going to be so comfortable or uncomfortable. But what I also really embrace is actually becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable as well, and that's just another really good way to sort of shift the mindset. So it's beautiful, beautiful to kind of share. And thank you very much for your presentation, Carrie Ann. So really, really, really appreciated your time.
Yeah. Well, I think we need to let Omar go to bed, and I need to give the Zoom channel back to the Global Chamber. So thank you so very much, Carrie Ann, and thank you, Omar, for what you shared, and also Lothar. And I'm going to go ahead and close this off and wish you all a good night.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Keep in touch.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye.
Bye.